is I want to calculate. Remember how I got this? By my regression work. Okay? And notice I did 1 year, 3 year, 5 year. I'm not going to do every year. Frankly, I have more confidence in my 3 year and 5 year than I do in my 1 year. But so then the question is, what is their interest margin going to be? In other words, what are these numbers going to be going forward based on what I can glean from these numbers? Okay? And for Lowe's, I read the chairman's letter, and the chairman said, we hope to get our interest margin up to 4.5 by 2015. And I gave them the benefit of the doubt, and I said they're going to be able to, in 5 years, they'll be back to where they were. With Home Depot, they're at 5.5 this year. I say, if activity picks up, they can be at 6 next year, but they're going to get up to 6.2, which is sort of what the long-term average is. These are estimates. Every 2 people doing these things are going to come up with 2 different estimates. And what you should be trying to do as a group is sort of, you say, I think it should be 4, you say, I think it should be 8. And then you sit and you say, well, I think it's 4 because, and you say, I think it's 8 because, and you try to figure out what's a reasonable number to put in there. Okay? In the end, one of the key things that you can do with this stuff is if you do this, you start to see, wow, that really, if I change that number, it really makes a difference to my final conclusion. If I change that number, not so much. So then you focus on the numbers that seem to be really making a difference, and you can really argue about them. Okay? Argue isn't relative to it. So I go from here to here. This is going from number of miles to miles per gallon to gallons. Okay? Is that calculation? Now, the next tricky thing is you've got to express this in terms of earnings per share. So you need to know how many shares are outstanding. And in some cases, this is the number of shares that were outstanding at the end of last year for both of these companies. Okay? Some companies do share buybacks. And so you've got to sort of go through those annual reports and say, are they doing a share buyback? Is the share buyback going to reduce the number of shares? These are the kinds of things. I know that Home Depot is doing a share buyback. I'm not sure about Lowe's. I doubt it. Just looking at the things quickly, I couldn't see that Lowe's was doing it. I know Home Depot is doing it. But to be honest, I didn't spend the time trying to go through their report and read what they say they're planning to do in the future. But they'll have it written there, what they're planning to do in the way of a share buyback. So then I just divide that number by that, and I get earnings per share. And this is what the earnings per share is supposed to be this year, and this is what it's supposed to be not in 2014, but 2015. And this is what it's supposed to be in February of 2017, or January, end of January 2017. So that's half of the equation. And then we're going to work on the other half of the equation. But this is enough to sort of chew on. Do you sort of see where we're going with this? Yeah.
The first year, the third year, and the fifth year, those are forecasted numbers, right?
Exactly.
Okay. The shares, the outstanding shares, you're gonna use the last year you have, and,
Unless I know there's a share buyback, then I'm gonna have to adjust it.
okay.
Okay.
You'd adjust it when that buyback is projected to come. Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of companies have been doing share buybacks, or had been doing share buybacks, but they're sort of squeezed for cash right now. A lot of them are squeezed for cash and are not doing it. The ones that have got tons of cash are doing it because they can buy their shares very, very cheaply.
What's the reasoning for doing that, to get a share buyback?
If you buy your shares back, you artificially increase, or you increase your earnings per share. Okay, and you know, lots of people, particularly since the stock market got whacked the way it did, are quite happy having their shares bought back. Notice they don't force you to sell the shares; they just offer to buy the shares. So if you're sitting there saying, you know, my finances are stretched, and a company like this is willing to buy shares back, and they'll typically buy it back at a price that's a little bit higher than the market price, you're quite happy with that.
So one question: you say when they buy the price, no, when they buy the stock back from you, would mean that they are creating a demand for the stock.
Exactly.
And is that one of the reasons why the price will?
Yep. Exactly. They've increased the demand. Exactly. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. It was only after I did all of this that I went onto the internet and found out what the analysts, the average analyst, is saying about these companies. And the average estimate for Lowe's is, as I recall, $1.63, and the high end of the range is $1.66, and the low end of the range is $1.60. So in my view, I don't do that because the analysts are right, but if I'm way, way off from the analyst, I better start thinking about how did I screw up? You know, why am I so wildly optimistic, or why am I so wildly pessimistic? But you know, these seem to be in the realm of things. So does everybody know how to do these regression things? Let me show you the regressions, and then I'm going to show you one other tricky thing that I did. Because I used to do this a lot, and I sort of... okay. Okay. I'm going to make a copy of this. And I'm going to put it at the head of the file so it's obvious that it's just there. Okay. To do a one variable regression, you go into this data analysis, regression, and you click OK. Oops. And it pops up this screen, and it says the Y range, the Y's are the variables that you're trying to explain. So it says, what are the variables that we're trying to explain for which we have data? And it's these. Okay, so I'm just going to take these. And then it says, what are the variables that you're using to explain it? And I'm just going to take one for the moment. I'll take the stores. And so I'll say, I'm going to use these. Now, if you check this, formula that it's trying to estimate looks like this. Like that. This is, in this case, the stores. This is, in this case, the revenues. And it's trying to put a function that looks like that between the two. Okay. Can you see that stores? I can turn that off. Well, let me turn it off later. But for the moment, I'm going to leave that one in there. And so I don't check that little box. I'm going to create one of those little A's. And then it says, where do you want me to put the output? And I'm just going to have it put the output right down here. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Start over. And I'm going to have it put the output here is where it's going to start. Now, if you leave it at the default, it'll put it on a new worksheet. That's where it goes by default. You don't click that one. Okay. And then I actually used to use these a lot, but for purposes of this exercise, don't use any of these. These give you a better sense of what's going on if you check it. But then you just hit, in this case, OK. And the first thing it's going to say is it's going to overwrite some data that I have there, and I don't care. And so then it prints out the R squared. It's got something called an analysis variance here that you can just ignore. And then it's got what the coefficient is, and then it's got what the x variable is. And actually the starts fit that pretty well. So that's how you do a single variable thing.